This is BACKTALK by Successful Black Parenting Magazine, the most listened to podcast for parents by parents.
Hey guys, thank you for listening to BACKTALK by Successful Black Parenting Magazine. You can help us to level up by supporting this podcast. All you have to do is go to anchor.fm and search for BACKTALK by Successful Black Parenting, and then hit the button that actually says support this podcast. I want you to go there now. Go, 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 go. And thank you ahead of time. Hey there, everyone, and thank you for listening to BACKTALK by Successful Black Parenting Magazine, the podcast talk show for parents. I'm Janice Robinson Celeste, your host and publisher of Successful Black Parenting Magazine. I want you to tell all of your friends and followers about the show. So go to our Facebook page for Successful Black Parenting and share the link with your followers right now and let people know that you are joining us. Even better, you can click the options and start a watch party. In addition, you can comment on Facebook and I will post the best comments live on air. And know that it can take a while for your questions to populate in the backstage area. So ask any questions early and don't wait. Know that our hashtag for the show is hashtag BACKTALK. And that way we can find all of your comments later on. So use hashtag BACKTALK. Now, I want to welcome back to the show Dr. Dorette Norazan. She is a fertility doctor, and she just released her newest book, The Fertility Manual, Reproductive Options for Your Family. I have a copy right here. If you've been trying to conceive, you will want to stay tuned or tag someone who is trying to conceive. This is really important stuff. So welcome.
Thank you, Janice, for having me again in your show.
No problem. We love having you. Let's start with your book. How is this book, this beautiful cover, look at that. How is this different from your last book, Miracle Baby?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. So Miracle Baby was released on October 8th, and Miracle Baby is my life story of what it's like to be both a fertility doctor and a patient. And I describe pretty raw details of, the roller coaster ride we go through in terms of trying to get pregnant and, get your hopes up only to have those hopes shattered in just a few weeks. And so it goes through details of my life and my story and ultimately my journey to have a child. And we ended up doing it via surrogacy as our final story. So that's my life story. And it's a good story to read. It's a book about hope, hope to have a child, and also hope in terms of it's my life story. And it describes, my very humble beginnings and my journey through life. Now, this new book, I'm super excited about this new book, The Fertility Manual. So I wrote this book to give patients a basic fertility 101 talk, to equip them with the knowledge they need to walk into the doctor's office and ask the right questions so they feel in control of their care and they know what's going on. And so the book breaks down simple things like, how do you know you have infertility? When should you go see the doctor? And the doctor gives you this long laundry list of questions and of tests, and why do you need to do all these tests? And then all the various types of treatments, and how do you know which treatment's right for you? And so it goes through all of those details. And then I spent a chapter talking about recurrent pregnancy loss, and you and I were just talking about that before the show began. There are women that, have no problems getting pregnant, but still do not have a live birth. And that's a real problem also. And so I spent a chapter talking about recurrent pregnancy loss. There's a chapter on donor egg, donor sperm, and surrogacy, because sometimes we have to borrow an egg, borrow a sperm or a uterus to have a baby. And the final chapter, which is oftentimes overlooked, is a chapter on the psychological diagnoses associated with infertility. Dealing with infertility can be incredibly stressful. And so there can be a lot of anxiety and depression. And so learning how to cope with those stresses and finding support groups and reaching out to people. So I spent the last chapter talking about that. And I'm hoping patients can use this book to give them the information they need, that they feel in control of their care.
That's perfect. I think that's great. And we're going to be talking about some of those things today. So hopefully you can give someone some advice who might need it, who is going through this or might hear this later on. But let's start at the beginning, or maybe is this the beginning? When should a couple go to see a fertility specialist? Is it after they have one failed attempt or three, or if they already know it's a challenge? When do they make that decision? When's the best time?
All of those that you just mentioned are perfectly good reasons to go see a fertility doctor. So we say you meet the diagnosis for infertility if you are a woman under age 35, trying for a year or longer to conceive. And if you're a woman over age 35 or 35 and older, trying for 6 months or longer to conceive, you certainly should go see the doctor. Now, if you know you have certain problems that would dictate you should see them soon, for example, women who don't have regular cycles and therefore do not ovulate should certainly go see the doctor from the very beginning. So there are multiple other reasons too that you can go and see the doctor from the very beginning. In terms of recurrent pregnancy loss, we say after 2 losses, certainly you want to do full testing for recurrent pregnancy loss because there may be reasons for the recurrent losses.
Let me ask you, is it a good idea for couples who haven't had any problems yet but are planning to have a baby to just go get checked out to see if everything's working?
I think that's a great idea. I have lots of couples that actually come in and see me for that. They just want the testing. They just want to know if everything works, and just so they know where they're starting from. Yes. So that's a very good idea to get tested. Yes.
All right. Now, are there cases when fertility just doesn't work, no matter what you've tried? And I imagine it has to be difficult for a couple to hear. Has this happened? And after trying even fertility treatments, what do you say? What do you tell these couples after they spend all this money trying to make a baby?
So many couples, the majority will get pregnant. Sometimes it's just within a few months. Sometimes it's a few years of trying several different types of treatments. It's not that often you see patients give up hope. But in the 21st century in the United States of America, becoming a parent is something very possible, whether it's fertility treatments or fertility treatments requiring donor egg, donor sperm, or surrogacy, or even moving on to adoption. The biggest thing I can say is to have hope, because parenthood is certainly a real possibility.
I see. What type of treatments are there? Like, what options do people have when they come to you?
So the very simple basic form of treatment is just giving some pills and telling them to have intercourse at the right time. So Clomid or letrozole are very common medications that we give to help patients ovulate, and they can have intercourse when they're ovulating. And then it can climb in terms of treatment after that. So you can take the pills, and then we can do what's called an intrauterine insemination, meaning we put the sperm sample directly into the uterus. And by doing so, we've shortened the distance for the sperm to get to the egg, and also we've bypassed the cervical mucus, where many times the sperm can get trapped there. So IUI is certainly another form of treatment. And then we can combine the IUI with the Clomid, the letrozole, or even with injectable medications that can help patients ovulate. Then after that, it would be in vitro fertilization, and that's where we get the eggs and sperm outside the body. We create the embryo in the lab and then subsequently transfer the embryo back to the uterus. And there's lots of testing that can be done also before we transfer the embryos back to the uterus. The most common testing that patients ask me for is what's called pre-implantation genetic testing, aneuploidy screening. And so aneuploidy screening, we all have, or embryos, they can have the correct number of chromosomes, which is a euploid embryo, and an aneuploid embryo has an incorrect number of chromosomes. An aneuploid embryo is less likely to result in a pregnancy or live birth, and a euploid embryo is more likely to result in a pregnancy or live birth. And so by testing the embryos for aneuploidy or euploidy, we can pick the better embryo for a transfer. Another form of testing that we can do in the embryo before we transfer is, for example, if breast and ovarian cancer runs in the family, and a certain family member has what's called the BRCA gene, which codes for breast and ovarian cancer, and they want to avoid passing down that gene to the next generation, we can certainly test the embryo for that gene to make sure that it doesn't carry the gene before transferring the embryo. So it does have a lot of help for patients. There are certain other recessive disorders. So cystic fibrosis is probably the most common one, where many people can be carriers for this disease. And if you're a carrier, nothing happens to you. But when two people who carry the gene for the cystic fibrosis get together and have a child, now that child has a very high chance of inheriting or getting both copies of the gene and therefore having the disease. And so it's certainly beneficial in those scenarios to do the genetic testing of the embryos.
That's mind-blowing, but go ahead, finish, please. That's amazing.
Yeah, and technology has gotten so good now that, we can freeze eggs. And so, we've been able to freeze sperm very well. And for several decades, we've been able to freeze embryos, but freezing eggs, we've been very slow at that. So the first egg was frozen in the 1980s, but didn't really have very good success. And now with the advent of vitrification, which is a way to rapidly freeze eggs, sperm, and embryos, we can freeze eggs and they survive the freeze-thaw process. And so, women used to have to choose, do I pursue my career, travel the world, or do I try to get married and have children before I get too old and cannot do so? And now that's a real possibility. And so there's a lot of social egg freezing now where women can bang their eggs and then worry about it later. The technology has just gotten so much better.
So if you're career minded and you're like, I have a daughter whose career is taking off right now and she's not thinking about having children, but she's in her 30s. So she's, it is in the back of her mind that her biological clock is ticking. So I'm going to even say that to her, you can freeze your eggs. So if you decide a little bit later on, you can do that, do so. So I might be sending her your way. I won't say her name. She'll kill me. But so technology is just fascinating to me, what they can do and what they can't do. But so how easy is it or not to be able to request a boy or girl through the embryo? Because I know it happens later on in the development of the embryo. Can we do that now? I don't know if we're there yet. Are we there yet?
So a lot of the genetic testing that we do, like the aneuploidy testing to test the embryo, so aneuploid embryos are less likely to implant and euploid embryos are more likely to implant. With that testing results, many times you will get the gender as part of the report. And I've had some patients say, we don't want to know the gender, we just want the healthy child, and you all just pick the best embryo. And, I write that in the orders and the embryologist picks the best euploid embryo. And then I've had other patients request, we wanted a boy or we wanted a girl, and that's a possibility also.
Really? Fantastic. That is amazing. I just, like I said, I find it totally fascinating that you can manipulate these embryos this way, or to be able to determine what it's, if it's going to be a healthy one or it's going to have some diseases or not. That's just fantastic. Let's talk about the psychological component of fertility and how couples manage, because I know that's got to be heavy, whether it's successful or they had to go through several types of treatments and they failed. They needed to use a surrogate, the surrogate's state of mind. Can you just touch on those things a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's truly a huge psychological component. A lot of it comes from stress. And so particularly for women and even for men, we think we're just going to grow up and have children when we're ready to have them. And as women, it feels like, it's something our bodies were born to do. And so to hear that we're going to need help is something very, very difficult to hear. Sometimes women don't feel attractive enough when they think, well, maybe my husband doesn't see me the same way anymore because I can't get pregnant. And sometimes men don't feel potent enough because they feel like they're not getting their wives pregnant. And so it can really affect the relationship. And then also the relationship with that female's friends, if she sees her friends are having babies and baby showers and, she wants to be happy for them, but at the same time, she's personally sad for herself. And how does she show up to that baby shower looking happy and feeling happy for her friend, which is the right thing to do? And we rely on our family and friends for support on many things. And so we share multiple aspects of our lives, including our day-to-day troubles, but something as intimate as our inability to conceive is not something we just want to share with the rest of the world. And so when we don't share it with those friends and family, then who do we talk to? And then it becomes very, very difficult, because those are the people we're used to leaning on for support. And, it's understandable with friends and family. You're afraid to share it because it's so much of your personal life. And you're afraid of the questions that may come back. Why isn't it working? And what's going on? And, always having to report, well, we're still not pregnant. And so internalizing a lot of this struggle is very, very difficult. And it's important for women and men to seek counseling, join support groups. Support groups are one of the biggest important things. It's really important for us to know that there are other people walking the same journey with us, because it can feel very isolating not knowing there are other people going through this. 1 in 8 couples cannot get pregnant now in the United States, and that's a lot of people. And so we all know someone. And so this stigma that existed for many decades, now we really need to just share our stories, because by sharing our stories, we're letting other people know it's okay to talk about that you're also struggling with fertility.
Right. Have you had couples who could not conceive no matter what type of treatment they had, and then went to adopt a child? Has that happened with any of your patients?
A couple of times I've had those.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And the thing is, it's a lot of it, you choose what is the best option for you.
Mm-hmm.
So, sometimes adoption may be a better option for them than donor egg or donor sperm. And it's important that people make the choice that fits them well.
Right. Now, what about, we talked about this a little bit the last time, what about the surrogate and their state of mind? I mean, to carry a baby in your body for 9 months, or sometimes less, but 9 months, basically, that has to really, you have to be a really special person for that not to affect you mentally. Yeah. Right.
Surrogates are incredibly kind, selfless people. And they do good for others because they know what it's like to have a child, and they want to give that gift to someone else. So it can be a difficult process for them, because their body does go through the physiological changes of pregnancy, but then there's no baby to take home. And surrogates are typically someone who already has children and is done with their own childbearing. And so it's usually someone who's mentally ready to do this process, not someone who feels like they're going to be losing this pregnancy. But it can be very difficult for them to cope with not having a child to hold at the end. Yes, I agree.
Now, are there times when the surrogate has been the egg donor?
So
that happen?
Traditional surrogacy, where the surrogate also provides the egg, is very uncommon in the United States. What's more common is gestational surrogacy, where the egg and sperm come from the intended parents, and then the embryo is created from their egg and sperm, and then the surrogate just carries the pregnancy. And that makes it psychologically, legally, emotionally very separated. And so traditional surrogacy is really not done often in the United States anymore. It's usually just gestational surrogacy.
Well, that's good to know. And thank you for all of the official terms, because I'm saying it as a layperson, I know nothing. So, but it's, like I said, it's still all amazing, like what can be done. And I know the mental part has to be draining for the parents as well. But what advice would you give the couples who experience reoccurring pregnancy loss?
The biggest advice I can give them is just to have hope. One of the things I see couples with struggle with recurrently is, they get excited that it's going to work, and then it doesn't work, and they lose hope, and they're devastated. and stressed out. And it takes sometimes a couple months or sometimes a year or two to come back from that. So the biggest advice I can give to them is to have hope.
Okay. Well, you already know I find this whole process fascinating, as I said many times. But what is the most fascinating thing for you about the technology part? 'Cause I know the baby is, that's the best part. But what about the technology of it all? Like, what makes you go, wow, we can do this?
It's so exciting that we can do this and we can give people the chance to have children. You know, when I think about, you know, in the 60s and 70s, you know, it was just pills, Clomid pills to help people ovulate. And then the first IVF baby was born in the 1970s. And we've just improved the technology so much more. I mean, there was a point in time where fresh transfers, meaning put the embryo back in just a few days after the retrieval, was the way to go, because we didn't know how to freeze and thaw embryos very well. And then now frozen transfers are more commonly done, because that gives the woman enough time for her body to heal, retrieval. That gives us some time to do tests of the embryos. And then we can transfer one embryo at a time. And so, you know, back in the day, we used to transfer several embryos because the chances of really all of them taking was very low. Because the technology was not as good, but now the technology is so good. We are looking at pregnancy success rates 60 to 80% per cycle with like really good embryos. That transferring one embryo at a time is pretty much the standard of care now.
I did not know that,
Yeah.
you know, because I heard of women going through this, having multiple births, or having to determine which embryos will remain viable. And, you know, so I did not know. So they're doing one now and just, you know, pretty successful. So,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned that. Actually, in the last 4 to 5 years, these statistics were just released last month, that we've seen a decrease in the twin live birth rate in the United States in the last 4 to 5 years. And it's because the technology is so much better now, and we're just transferring one embryo at a time. And that also means less NICU stays and healthy babies. So the technology has really improved in the last many years.
Oh, wow. I'm glad to hear that, because I know a lot of parents that make the news anyway would say that they did not want to choose who made it, who didn't. So they decided to keep them all, and they had these multiples, which it's got to be a hard decision. So I'm glad to see that we've come a long way.
Yeah.
What is the one thing you want parents to know who might be contemplating going through fertility treatments?
Oh, the one thing I want them to know is it really boils down to just having hope that there's a true chance that someday, and probably in the very near future, that they will have their own miracle baby, so they can just have hope.
That's good. Keep hope alive with it, you guys, because you know, the end result is the best. So hopefully you can have a beautiful baby at the end of your treatments, and you'll take them home and all's well. But I want to thank you again, but I want you to tell us about how to get your book. And I'm gonna put your book back up here and try to position it so we're like this. Tell us how we can find this wonderful book, The Fertility Manual.
Absolutely. You can find it on Amazon or Barnes & Nobles, and you can go directly to my website, www.drdrnorhassen.com.
All right. Well, thank you. And we're at the end of our time, but I want to thank you for coming on the show once again. You're always a pleasure to have. And thank you all for listening to BACKTALK by Successful Black Parenting Magazine, the podcast talk show for parents. If you missed part of the show, no worries. You can just wait a few minutes and click the replay of this podcast. Share it with anyone who needs to hear it, and let's get the word out. Our next episode is tomorrow, November 16th at 11 a.m. And we will be following up on this topic and discussing pregnancy loss with a mom who was empowered to help other moms when she went through it. And that will be our last podcast for 2019, guys. We'll be back on January 15th, 2020. 2020 is already here. And all new topics with expert guests. So look for the post on each broadcast on Facebook, on our Facebook page at Black Parenting One. Be sure to tag any friends in the post and be sure to hit the get reminder button. That's the ticket. That's the secret. If you want to make sure you don't miss a podcast, hit that get reminder button. And you can always, again, ask us questions. So don't forget about that. And one more thing, don't forget to follow us too on Twitter and on Facebook at Black Parenting One and on Instagram at Black Parenting Magazine. Our website is right here here it is, successfulblackparenting.com, and it's full of good content to help you thrive and not just survive as a parent. And be sure to rate our podcast. Until next time, take care of yourself because you never know when the world will need you. Bye, guys.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks for tuning in to Back Talk by Successful Black Parenting Magazine. We'll see you soon.